So people keep asking my opinion on characters and how I design characters and how I would improve characters. So I figured I'd show you how I do it. It's not a very complicated or secretive thing. It's a variant on a very, very common setup. If you go to a writer's workshop, you're going to learn the same foundations there. But I'll tell you how I do it because I keep getting asked these questions. So this is the official, this is how Craig writes characters video. My focus is on getting a lot of characters into the scenes that they need to be in, having them have the right impact, and then getting them off stage again. I do computer RPGs, I do tabletop RPGs, I do comic books. So it's important that I be able to write a lot of characters very, very quickly, have them all have just the right amount of impact, and have the story keep rolling. This is doubly important because all the things I do tend to be a little bit chaotic in terms of where the players are going to go next or what they expect to see next. So I have to have characters that I can't go back afterwards and fix it. It's already there. It's already done. It's already out in the world. So I need to build characters in a way that they hold up, even if they're not perfect, and that in the long run, I'll be able to use those characters in another way and make it look like it was on purpose. So to do that, I just think of things in terms of how the characters serve the structure of the story. Generally speaking, I split the characters into three kinds of performances. Some characters have multiple types of performances, but most characters are focused on specifically just one. There are lead performances. There are support performances. And then there are bit performances. A lead performance is when that character's personal story is the dramatic focus of the narrative, at least when it's happening. In many movies and such, you're going to have maybe 2 or 3 leads, like the protagonist and the antagonist. So for example, in Star Wars, you got Luke. He's a lead character in that he is literally the lead character. You've also got Darth Vader. He's got his own arc, and although it obviously is part of Luke's arc, when he's on screen and his arc is unfolding, he has the dramatic focus. He captures the camera, he keeps the camera, and everybody's thinking about him, not about how Luke thinks. He's not there to just push Luke's arc forward. He's there because his own arc can hold everybody's attention. We've also got some smaller leads, such as Obi-Wan Kenobi on the original movies we're talking about here, and of course Han Solo. So with these leads in mind, you can see how there are big and there are small leads and all that stuff, but what I'm coming at is from a structural angle. If I need a lead, it's because I need to tell a chunk of story. If it's a tabletop RPG, most of your leads are going to be player characters, and you're going to want to make sure that you understand how the player characters' story arcs intertwine. In a computer RPG, your leads are probably going to be the party members, and so you need to determine how they're going to work before you actually put them into the game world. So the leads require the most thought. They require the most writing up front. There are a few characteristics that you're going to need for your leads, but the most important one is that their stories have to work together, because the final narrative is all of their stories wound together properly. That means their stories have to support each other structurally, thematically, and emotionally, not just one, then the next, then the next. This is not a sequence of short stories that happen to be told in the same order. This is a sequence of short stories that happen to build into a big final story. So in this case, these two characters here, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Han Solo, they both have redemption arcs. Obi-Wan finally, he doesn't redeem himself because he never really did anything horrible, but he gives into his past. He tries to make up for his past by allowing Darth Vader to kill him. And Han Solo comes back from abandoning Luke. And those two pieces are very, very similar to Darth Vader's final arc, which is redeeming himself and sacrificing himself to kill off the Emperor. So these arcs get together very well. These are 3 arcs that have the same thematic and structural thrust. And because of that, Star Wars has forever since then had a core theme of good guys winning in the end. Even if they die, they still eventually win. Their inherent goodness comes through and wins the day. And all 3 of these secondary leads support that. So if you're wondering what sort of stories your leads should have, the most critical thing is that they should be stories that resonate with each other. They have stories, they're stories that have the same basic thrust. Then, of course, we've got support characters. Support characters are going to be things like R2-D2 and C-3PO. The point of a support character is to push the story along. So although the lead stories form the final narrative, they often don't, they're not just the only thing there. You need a lot of supportive connective tissue, and that's where the support characters come in. R2-D2 and C-3PO really carry the first 20 minutes of the original movie. They introduce almost all of the main characters. They introduce all of the main factions and the planet. They allow Luke to introduce himself and talk about who he is and what he wants. They get him involved in the plot, and they push him into meeting another main character. They do a lot of work. But they don't have their own personal arc. They don't have their own dramatic moment that matters. They do have some dramatic moments, but it's not really in service of their own personal arc. And they just don't have a star presence. So even if we wanted to make them lead characters, it'd be very, very challenging because they do not have the charisma required to pull dramatic focus for that long. They do have charisma, though. Especially together, R2-D2 and C-3PO have enough charisma that the people are willing to buy into their ability to influence the plot. If these robots were lacking in charisma, if these characters had no charisma, we would really not buy that Luke listens to them and goes off to find old Ben. We would just be like, come on, Luke, those guys don't, just ignore them. Go back to drinking blue milk. Because of that, if we were thinking about things in terms of charisma, leads need to have that star quality. Supporting characters don't need to have a star quality, but they need to have enough of an impact that the players will, or audience will, remember them and want to agree with them. So, or disagree with them. So whether it's a supporting character that you like or you dislike, they have to have enough of an impact that we buy them influencing the story. We have to buy them driving the story forward. Now, driving the story forward doesn't necessarily mean moving it to another plot point. It could be introducing a new faction or telling you what to think about something. But the point is that they are moving the player's experience or the audience's experience forward. Leads often act as supporting characters. When Han Solo and Obi-Wan are not out there on the stage doing their thing, they are still on screen supporting the other characters. Obi-Wan talks to Luke at great length, trains Luke. All of these things are in services of Luke's plot arc. So in those times, Obi-Wan is acting as support. These are not categories that are exclusive. You can be all of these things at once. But I want to talk about, structurally, what do you need from a character at this moment? And what sort of character will work for that situation? If we come into a situation where, let's say we're doing a tabletop RPG, and the players haven't found something out, like this city is owned by the bad guy, and the players are supposed to figure that out, and they haven't figured it out yet. What are we going to do? Well, we would probably want to introduce a supporting character. A supporting character that could convince the players to take his side against the city overlords, which are then revealed to be the party member's enemy anyway. The reason we do this is because having someone come up and say, hey, this is actually owned by the bad guy, is a letdown. We don't want to just have the tension deflate like that. We want it to be something where the players are buying into it and then realize, ooh, this is actually a lot bigger than we thought it was. Because of that, we're going to need a supporting character that's got a little bit of charisma. Whether the players want to work for him or against him, with him or against him, we want that supporting character to be able to hold ground in the dramatic theater that we're playing here. So we wouldn't just come out and say, oh, the city's owned by the bad guy. Once we realize the players are having a hard time getting to the plot point we need, we introduce a supporting character, someone with charisma, to pull them forward. Bit characters, on the other hand, don't have any charisma. I mean, they might be likable, but they're not someone that holds the stage. If you look back on a movie and you think about all the characters in the movie, you're going to remember the leads. You're going to remember most of the supporting characters. The bit characters, you're only going to remember if someone makes a meme out of them 20 years later. It's a trap. It looks something like that, right? So the It's a Trap guy is a general or an admiral in the rebellion fleet, and his role here is not to move the story forward. The story is already moving. His role is to tell the audience exactly what they should think about what's going on right now. His role is to sell the story, not to move the story. And because of that, he's not supposed to leave much of a personal impact. He's supposed to just have the characteristics that you would need in order to move the story, in order to feel the story, not in order to remember the character, not in order to move the story forward. So a bit role is not supposed to stand out. That's kind of the point. Obviously, these are all very fuzzy. You do have supporters that become bits and bits that become supporters and so on and so forth. But when I'm creating a character, I'm creating a character for one of these purposes. And whatever it becomes later, I'll be able to finagle it if I need to. So let's just give you an example. Your players roll up to a village, and out comes a blacksmith. So here's a smithy, and here's our blacksmith. What's the character going to be for the blacksmith? Now, if you listen to a lot of advice from people who talk about how to design, RPG characters, it'll be like, give him a slightly unique voice, or have him want something, or I don't subscribe to that. You can have a blacksmith come out and be like, "Hey guys, do you want any swords?" And sure, you can put Bobcat in as a character, but that would be a supporting role. That would be someone whose job is to move the players forward. It's a character with enough impact and enough charisma that the players will remember him. If the role of the blacksmith is to sell the situation instead of moving the situation, then you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to have someone who is there specifically to reinforce whatever's happening. So if the players come into this village and the village has been under attack by bandits, then what they're going to see is a blacksmith that's eyeing them suspiciously because they're carrying weapons like bandits. And when they come up, he might be like, I don't deal with weapons. I just sell horseshoes and clamps and all that stuff. If you need a shovel, I can help you out. But if you need a sword, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The character has no impact in terms of being memorable. But what he does is he sells the players on the idea that this town is really in trouble. This town is scared stiff, and this town needs some heroes. That's the role of a bit player. If later on they decide that they're going to talk to the blacksmith at length, you can promote him. You can make him into a supporting character by adding in some more charismatic elements, like he's got a family, or he used to be an adventurer, or something that will make them think fondly of him and remember him later. And that's it. That is my approach. I try and make sure that all the lead characters have stories that are structurally, thematically, and emotionally relevant to each other. Then I use supporting characters to help to tie all of those stories together. It's not necessarily one, then the next, then the next. They're usually intertwined long term. And then I use bit characters to sell the story. That's it. It's an easy way to think about characters. It doesn't produce the kinds of characters that you'd want if you were doing like a play on the nature of mankind or something, but it works fine for stories in which you do not have 100% control. If you're writing an RPG or running an RPG, or if you are trying to work with other writers in like a serial comic book or something, this is a good way to create characters that fill exactly the roles that you need them to fill, get on screen quickly, make the right amount of impact, and then get out of the way. And that's it. Have a good one.